Sorry. There I am. If you haven't grabbed any coffee, tea, or dessert, that's in the lobby. You guys can enjoy that while we're going through our time in the Word this evening. And just really glad to be together. And hopefully you grabbed a printout. If you haven't, you can grab one of those now. The style of Wednesday nights is to be a casual, closer kind of vibe and going through like something like these printouts. So they're a little bit more, not so much fill in the blank, but they are going to be, I'm going to be going through them on my notes where you guys can follow along with those. And just wanted to kind of reiterate what our hope is through this time. You know, I think, again, like I said last week, it is incredibly important that we look clearly in our own kind of disciplines and walks with the Lord around the idea of prayer. You know, there's a lot of statistics out there that say Christians pray less than a minute a day outside of what you're doing and you're praying for your food if you get to it. And I don't say that to condemn or to cast stones or to say, like, aren't we just absolutely terrible human beings? I'm not saying that. What I would like to do is just to acknowledge that and to say, if that is the case, let's prioritize prayer. And let's provide the space to be able to learn how to pray. And sometimes, in order to learn, you just have to do it. Right? There's times where we can read a book, we can sit with someone, get counsel from someone, and then there's other times where we just have to do it. So part of this time is going to be just that. We're going to look tonight at Psalm 139, looking at just a handful of the attributes of God. This is not an exhaustive study at all. I feel like we could do a series on the attributes of God that could go 6, 7, 8 weeks alone. People have written great books on the attributes of God. These are just some of the attributes that I see in this particular psalm. And a lot of times, what we say in prayer, oftentimes, or how we pray, oftentimes gives a decent indication of how we view God. You know, if we view God as a God who can, we view God as a God who can do incredible miracles, our prayers will oftentimes mirror that, right? We'll pray big prayers, believing prayers. We will ask for the moon in our prayers, right? Because we view God as a God who is a miracle worker. And a lot of times in what we're praying, that's how we view God and what our relationship is with Him. And that's my heart and desire, is that all of us would enter into a healthy, balanced, and strong biblical relationship with God. That when we ask God for a piece of bread, He's not up there going, I know you asked for bread, but I'm going to give you a stone. You know, when we ask God for protection, He says, I know you asked for protection, but I'm going to give you this scorpion because I'm a God who loves to discipline, or I'm a God who loves to make you feel guilty or not safe. That's not who God is. My heart and my desire is that the more we dedicate time to gathering together and knowing who God is, we will then in turn know how to pray prayers that are deeper, that are bigger, that are stronger in scriptural foundation. That when we set out, like we did last week, right? When I said, we're going to pray for 8 minutes, and a lot of you were like, oh, what? That's going to be so long. And when we finished after 10 minutes, you guys felt like, most of you felt like, man, that was really quick. And that's our goal. My heart is that we would go deep in our prayers. So the writer of Psalm 139 is King David. And in his prayer, in his writing of this psalm, he wanted to be in the center of the will of God. And in this psalm, David recalls a few attributes of God when he prays. The three things that he prays in this psalm, and we're going to go through it, is that God is an omniscient God. Now, some of these words are going to seem really big, but don't worry, we're going to break them down to be very small. So God, being an omniscient God, he is the one who knows all things. He is the one who knows all things. Nothing past, nothing present, and nothing future is hidden from him. Nothing is going to catch God off guard. Nothing is going to come as a surprise to him. Why? Because he is omniscient. He is a God who knows all things. The second thing we see is omnipresent, that God can be experienced and can be engaged in relationship in any place by those who desire to know him, who desire to engage with him. So he's not bound to a particular place. So what this gives us a freedom. I need to take my vest off. A lot of times you don't think vests are that warm because there's only half, but they kind of are. I'm new to the vest game. This is my first vest really that I've ever owned. It was given to me by my neighbor because he ordered it and it was a little too big for him. And he saw me outside and said, I'm going to give you this vest. And I put it on and now I'm like sweaty. So part of the hope is that we would find freedom in that we can engage with God and pray to him anywhere you're at. You know, it's important to have a prayer closet. It's important to have what we would call a war room, right? It's important to have places where we retreat to, that we have focus, that we can engage with God, that we can quiet our minds. It's important to take practical steps, but at the same time, if the only prayer that you can fit in is on your drive into work, that is a valuable experience with God at that particular place. So when you have a need, when you have a request, when you have a burden, go to God right there, because he can be experienced in any place by those who want to know him. And then he is omnipotent, meaning he is the God who can do all things according to his will and his purpose. So when we know this about God, it radically changes the way that we pray, right? It's not the so much, God, if you can. It's not the so much, God, if you're near. It's God, you are near and you can. Disciplined and mature enough to follow the prayer language of Jesus that would also submit to God's will. To simply say after, God, you are near, God, you can, but nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done, right? So that's the balance that we're striving for. So here, let's look at this psalm and how we can see these three different attributes displayed in what David wrote and what David prayed and communicated to God. So the first thing that David recognizes about God is that he knows everything, so that he cannot hide from him, even if he wanted to. Let's look at verses 1 through 6. It says, to the choir master, a psalm of David, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it. One of the things that I just wanted to point out in this is a prayer like that can kind of be used as an abuse towards the sheep. Meaning, there's a time where people will paint a picture that says, you can't hide from God. Right? They'll paint a picture that says, God knows every thought that you think even before you think it. He knows every word that you're going to speak before you even speak it. And even if I wanted to hide from you, I wouldn't, you can't hide from God. And almost painting a picture of this idea that like God's just waiting to sort of, catch us. Like, yeah, see, I told you can't hide. And when we mess up or when we make a decision or we begin to stray, we hear this used as like well, I told you so. it says in Psalm 139, verses 1 through 6, this, and this about, us not being able to hide from God, or us, all of these things. And it can sort of be used in a negative sense. I don't think that's what David is getting at here. When he begins to write this and pray this, he is reiterating that God knows every move that we make. There in verse 2, it says, that he knows every move that we make. And it's not so much I'm watching you, but it's more of I care for you. I've got my eye on you. You're on my radar. He knows every move that we make. And then in the further part of verse 2, it says that he knows every thought. And here's what I take from that. He still sent his son Jesus to die for us. What does that say about God? He knows where we are going, where we're at, and he knows every thought that we have. And he still says, I choose you. I choose you. You are one that I will send my son to die for. God knows every moment that we live. Nothing escapes his notice. Nothing is off of his radar. Our entire life is in the hands of God. It's a discipline for us to realize this, right? Because when we think about these verses, we're reiterating, or David's reiterating, the omniscience of God. That God is a God who knows our moves, our thoughts, every moment we have, every direction we take. And he also knows when we go against, outside of his will. We begin to venture off of that road. And another way to reiterate this attribute is in verse 4, where it reiterates that God knows every word that we speak. Again, not to be used to beat the sheep, not to be used to discourage you, not to be used to frighten you either. This is to be taken and to further color in the character of God, so that when we pray to him, we can say, God, you know this. You're aware of this. I'm not getting God up to speed on the current situation. We're simply recognizing that he already knows it, and we're going to continue to put our request before him. So he knows every word. He knows every thought. He knows every move. He knows every moment. God is a God who knows, okay? And he is pleased with you. Be reminded of that. God is pleased with you. David was a man who did some crazy things in his life, but he was also a man after God's own heart. God knows us. He knows our thoughts, and he is the omniscient God. Secondly, David knows that there's nowhere to escape from God, right? He knows this from experience, and he knows this about God. And this is to reiterate the omnipresence of God through verses 7 through 12, that God can be found everywhere. In verse 7, he says, where shall I go from your spirit? Where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is bright as the day, for darkness is as light with you. God is omnipresent. God is all present. We can't hide from him. Again, though, it's not like he's stomping through the house, flipping on switches, just looking for us. Like, I just can't wait to find you and wait until I get my hands on you. I know you can't hide from me. It's not that spirit that we apply this. I think it's the spirit of the fact that we will never be able to be out of the reach of God. We'll never be able to just be out of the reach of God. We oftentimes find God, exactly where we left him, right? On one hand, it's not that he has left us. It's not that he has deserted us. It's us turning from him, but he is everywhere. I think even in some of the darker moments of my life, in times where I was not in a healthy place, times where I might have said things to God privately that I was just kind of like, oh, is that okay to say? I just was, in those times reminded God's still near. There's no place we can go that he can't find us. And the third thing that we see, just to be reminded that distance does not separate us from God. Darkness does not hide us from God. And death does not remove us from God. When we are with him, nowhere that we can go will we ever be separated from him. And then the omnipotence of God, right? In verses 13 through 18, the fact that God can do all things. Look at this. He says, "For you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you. Why? For I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance, and in your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet though there was none of them. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them." God is our creator. He was the one who formed us in our mother's womb. He made us for himself. He made us to engage in relationship with him. And he made us for a purpose. So when we look at those three things, we can say he is our creator. He's made us for himself, and he's made us with a purpose. That when we approach God in prayer, we approach him from the standpoint where we say God can. So the things that you're burdened by, the things that you desire, I'm talking like deep desires. Everybody has them. Commit to praying. And I'm not of that like line of thinking that's like, if you pray about it, it's going to happen. No, I've prayed for things for a long, long time, and they still haven't happened. And they might not ever. But I'm going to continue to pray, continue to ask, continue to put this before God, and continue to put it before him under the spirit of God can. God can do this. And when we think about that, we think about these things, we then get to a deeper, more accurate place, I believe, in our prayers, and that is that we become more in tune with what the will of God is for our lives. If you jump forward, and I've put it, I think, in the notes there in verses 23 and 24, you'll see that the prayer of the person this is a prayer of the person who wants to be in God's will, who desires God's will, right? That we would say, search me and know me. Know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way. Another translation is wicked. Right? Any wicked way within me. Lead me in the way everlasting. Guys, when we think about God, we think about nothing is hidden from him. He knows all things. He knows the damage that others have caused towards us through their words and their actions. He knows the things we've said and done. And sometimes that list is long, right? He knows that we've harmed people, that we've hurt people, right? He knows everything. And he knows David. He knows the psalmist here. He knows that David was coming to him with this openness to God, that God might search him. I think when we get to this point of saying to God, search me and know me, see if there's any wicked way within me, any wickedness, we're simply saying, God, I'm going to allow you to do that heart surgery, to recenter and realign and reposition my desires to then be your desires, right? My wants to then be your wants. And I think for us, when we engage in prayer, because this is what the context of what we're talking about tonight, When we engage in prayer, do our prayers line up with the attributes of God? Do we pray to God in a way that we know that he is all-powerful, all-knowing, and everywhere? That there's nothing hindered, that nothing can hinder him and nothing is hidden from him, right? And then to simply say after all of that, but God, search me and know me. Do that heart surgery on me. And I think that is really the heart of the prayer that David prays here in Psalm 139, right? Again, it's not I tried to run from you, God, and you chased me down, and I can't get out from underneath your thumb. And it's not that. I'm watching you, like God's not like the big brother in the sky that's like constantly creeping on us. Like he's the God that says, you matter. I know you. You're on my radar. So for us tonight, we get to engage in prayer in this way. And that's what we're going to do together. So at this point, I'm just going to talk to the camera for a second because I need to dismiss those who are tuning in online. Really glad you guys have been with us. Spend time praying that God is a God who is all-knowing, all-powerful, and everywhere, and that he loves you. Spend that time praying as we spend our corporate time praying together. God bless you guys. You can tune in next week or join us in person or Sunday